The desert was quiet in a way that made a person's heartbeat sound louder than it should. Wind moved across the wide land, brushing against sunburnt rocks and tall cactus arms standing like old guardians. It was the kind of wild place where a lone soul could disappear without anyone knowing. And yet it was also the kind of place where fate liked to tie lives together when they least expected it. That morning, a wounded widow named Leora learned just how unforgiving the land could be when she fell on a sharp stone while trying to outrun a storm of dust and fear. Her dress was torn at the knee, and warm blood mixed with sand as she tried to drag herself forward. Whispering prayers that had held her together since the day she buried her husband, she had been walking for hours, hoping to reach the river before nightfall. She knew little about these parts, only that it was Apache territory and that most settlers stayed away. But danger didn't scare her as much as staying where she came from. She had nothing left there. No protection. No home. No future. All she wanted was a place quiet enough for her heart to breathe again. By the time the sun reached its highest point, she could no longer stand. She pressed her hands against the ground, trembling, trying to push herself up. Pain shot through her leg, sharp and unforgiving. The red stain on her skin spread like a warning. She swallowed hard, blinking through heat waves rising from the sand. She wasn't afraid of death, but she wasn't ready to surrender either. That was when she heard the soft beat of hooves. She froze. Every story she had heard about Apache warriors rushed into her mind, stories told by folks who never bothered to meet one. She didn't know what to believe. She only knew someone was watching her. The footsteps stopped behind her, silent and strong. Then a shadow covered her from the harsh sun. Leora slowly turned her head. Standing there was a tall Apache warrior with dark braids tied back, a leather band wrapped around his forehead, and a steady gaze that looked like it could see into the truth of a person's soul. His presence held power, but not the kind that struck fear. It was the kind that made the land itself pause. His name was Taza, though she didn't know it yet. To her, he was only a stranger with eyes sharp as canyon stone and a face carved by sun and storms. For a long moment, neither moved. The desert held its breath. He knelt beside her without a word, scanning the wound on her leg. She tried to pull back, unsure if she should trust him, but she couldn't move far. His voice broke the silence, low and steady. "If you keep bleeding, the desert will take you." The tone wasn't cruel. It was honest, almost gentle. She swallowed against the dryness in her throat and whispered, "Why would you help me?" He studied her torn dress and the dirt on her palms. "You are hurt. That is reason enough." Leora had not been spoken to with kindness in a long time. It softened something in her chest, but she kept her guard up. She watched him take a leather pouch from his side, filled with herbs and strips of cloth. His hands were rough from work, yet gentle in the way they touched her injured leg. He ground herbs with a stone, mixed them with water from his flask, and pressed the cool paste onto her wound. The sting was sharp, forcing her breath to catch. But relief followed soon after. "You saved my leg," she said quietly, more grateful than she dared show. He looked into her eyes. "The land is wide, but life is still precious." There was something in his voice, something that carried weight. She sensed he carried wounds too, wounds far deeper than hers. Wounds a person couldn't see from the outside. He wrapped her leg with steady skill, tying the cloth firmly. When he finished, he sat back on his heels, still watching her. "You should not travel alone," he said. "Not here." Leora pulled her dress lower over the bandage and tried to sit upright. Pain sparked in her side. "I have nowhere to go," she admitted, her voice thin but honest. She didn't plan on saying it, but the truth slipped out before she could stop it. Taz's brow lowered slightly. "Everyone has somewhere. Not me," she whispered. "Not anymore." He looked away for a moment, toward the far mountains rising in the distance. "I know what it feels like to lose a home," he said. His tone didn't ask for sympathy. It spoke of buried memories, heavy ones. She studied his strong shoulders, the careful way he breathed. He seemed like someone carved from strength. Yet his words carried sorrow that only someone who had lived through storms of his own could understand. Before she could speak again, A sharp cry echoed across the land. Taza immediately turned his head, his body tensing. His hand moved to the small knife at his belt. Leora's heart slammed against her ribs. "What is it?" she whispered. He didn't answer at first. He listened. His eyes narrowed at the horizon. Riders. Fear crawled up her spine. "Are they dangerous?" "All men can be dangerous," he replied. "But these ones ride fast. That means trouble or hunger." He glanced at her wounded leg. "You cannot run." Her pulse quickened. The desert suddenly felt smaller, its emptiness shrinking into something threatening. She looked at him with wide eyes, unsure what to expect. He rose to his feet, tall and unshaken, scanning the land with the calm of someone used to facing danger. Then he looked down at her again. Something shifted in his expression. It wasn't fear. It wasn't worry. It was decision. He extended his hand. "Come with me." She hesitated. She didn't know him. She didn't know where he would take her. But the sound of riders grew louder, echoing like thunder. Her leg throbbed. Her breath shook. And the only safe place in that moment seemed to be the shadow of this strong warrior who had shown kindness without asking anything in return. She placed her hand in his. His grip was warm and steady. He pulled her up carefully, supporting her weight as if it didn't burden him at all. "Who are they?" she asked, her voice trembling. His jaw tightened. "Men who take what they want." Her heart dropped. "Will they come this way?" His silence was answer enough. He lifted her onto his horse, keeping his hand on her back to steady her. His touch was firm but respectful, protective without claiming. She felt the strength in him, not just in muscle but in spirit. "Why are you helping me?" she asked again, softer now. He stepped beside the horse, eyes meeting hers with a depth that made her chest warm. "Because saving one life is saving the land itself," he replied. "And because you look like someone who has suffered enough." Before she could answer, the distant riders came closer, dust rising behind them like a warning. Taz's expression hardened. "Hold on." The horse shifted beneath her. The wind picked up. The danger drew nearer with every heartbeat, and she realized one truth with sudden clarity. Whatever happened next would change everything she thought she knew about fear, about trust, and about the man who had healed her. Wounded leg in the middle of a merciless desert as the first rider's shadow appeared on the horizon. Taza swung up behind her, wrapped one strong arm around her waist, and whispered a single line that raised every hair on her skin. "Stay close to me." The horse lunged forward, and the desert, once silent, exploded into danger. The horse surged across the open land, kicking up sand behind them as Taza guided it with sharp, practiced movements. Leora clung to the saddle horn with one hand and to him with the other. His arm stayed firm around her, steadying her with a protectiveness she had never felt from anyone before. The wind slapped at her face and tangled her hair, and the pounding of hooves felt like a warning echoing through her bones. Every breath she took carried the dust of the desert and the weight of fear she wished she could outrun. She dared a glance over her shoulder. Shapes moved in the distance, still far, but approaching fast. Whoever those riders were, they weren't wandering by accident. They followed with purpose, and the trail she had left behind while crawling in the sand earlier made it easy to track her. She tightened her grip on Taz's arm, trying to steady her breathing. "Why are they after me?" she managed to say over the rushing wind. Taza leaned slightly forward, guiding the horse between two rocky hills. "Maybe they are not after you. Maybe they are after anything they can take. This land draws all kinds." His tone held no panic, just a calm strength that somehow made her feel safer, even with danger closing in behind them. But something in his voice told her he wasn't speaking only of strangers. He spoke from experience, from wounds that had never healed, as they passed between jagged stones. Leora felt her injured leg throb under the bandage he had tied for her. Pain shot through her with every jolt, but she gritted her teeth and held on. She had survived worse. The storms she faced before finding herself in this desert were heavier than the one chasing her now. Taza slowed the horse once. They reached the shelter of the rocky path. He guided it behind a cluster of tall boulders where the land dipped. From here they could not be easily seen, He dismounted first, his movements quick and silent. Then he placed his hands around her waist and lowered her gently to the ground, careful not to strain her injured leg. His touch was steady, respectful, but strong enough that she knew she could lean on him without fear of falling. Leora leaned against a rock, catching her breath. "Do you think they will find us here?" He scanned the open land from between two stones. "They might. But distance will slow them." The sun cast a warm glare across his shoulders, making him look carved from the very earth they stood on. She watched him with a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. She didn't know his story, didn't know why he was alone in this land, or what had brought him to her. But she felt something calm in his presence, something she hadn't felt since before her life fell apart. He turned back to her. "You need water," he offered his flask. She took it with trembling hands, sipping just enough to wet her dry throat. "Thank you," she whispered. Tadaz nodded, then settled beside her. His gaze stayed on the horizon, but his body remained still as stone. "You came a long way," he said quietly. "Where were you going?" She hesitated. Speaking of her past was like opening a wound she worked hard to close. But she owed him truth. "I left my town 3 days ago. I didn't plan to go far. I only planned to leave behind everything that hurt." He didn't look at her, but she felt he listened. His silence encouraged her to continue. "My husband passed last winter," she said. Her voice tightened, raw from memories she avoided for months. "He was a good man, but the town changed after he left. People changed. They looked at me like I had nothing to offer anymore. Some spoke with pity, some with judgment. I tried to stay, but every day felt colder." Taz's jaw tightened slightly, though he kept his eyes on the open land. "A woman should not be pushed out for surviving," he said. Leora nodded. "I needed a place where I could breathe. I thought if I kept moving, maybe I would find one." "What did you leave behind?" he asked. "Only dust and closed doors." He turned toward her, meeting her gaze with eyes that felt deep and steady. "Sometimes leaving is the only way a heart can heal." She swallowed hard. "And you? What are you doing alone in the desert?" His eyes shifted away again. A shadow crossed his expression, one she recognized. Pain, regret, something heavy. "I did not choose to be alone," he said. "But some paths open only after others close." His hand traced a faint scar running along his forearm. "My people faced hardship. Some stayed together. Some walked separate ways. I walk mine." She sensed there was more, something deeper, but she didn't pry. He would tell her when he was ready, if ever. A sharp gust of wind pushed sand around them, snapping them back to the present. Taza stood, listening again. The desert carried sounds far, but now there was only silence. "They will search for tracks," he said. "We cannot stay here long." Leora tried to stand, but pain surged through her leg. She sucked in a breath and reached for the rock to balance herself. Taza stepped forward instantly, placing a hand under her arm. "You cannot walk far." "Oh, I have to try," she whispered. He shook his head once. "You should ride. I will guide you, but they will see us." "They will see me first," he replied. "And that gives you a chance." Her heart lurched. "I don't want you getting hurt because of me." His eyes softened just a little. "You did not choose this danger. And no one should face trouble alone." Before she could respond, a distant echo of hooves pulsed through the ground. Faint, but unmistakable. Coming closer again, Leora's breath caught. "They found our trail." Taza scanned the distance, his posture sharpening. "They are determined," he murmured. "More determined than they should be." "What does that mean?" "Means their reason might not be random." Fear twisted inside her. "Then what reason would they have?" Taza didn't answer. Instead, he moved quickly. He helped her onto the horse again, securing her safely. Then he stepped away and brushed his fingers along the sand, studying tracks she hadn't even seen. He traced the distance between hoofprints with practiced precision. "These are not settlers," he said quietly. "Their horses run harder. Their path is tight. They chase something, not wander." She felt a chill. "Chase me, maybe. Or maybe they chase anyone alone." He stood and tightened the cinch of the saddle. "Either way, we move." "But where will we go?" she asked. He looked toward the far ridges where the desert rose into layered stone cliffs. "There is a canyon my people used long ago. It offers shelter." "And answers about what?" Paused, as if weighing how much to tell her. "About why you were found in my land. Why those riders follow your trail with such hunger. And about the wound I carry that you do not yet see." Her pulse quickened. She didn't understand what he meant, but there was a seriousness in his voice that rooted deep inside her. "Taza," she whispered. "What wound?" He met her gaze, and for the first time since she had met him, she saw pain that went beyond words, the kind that teaches a man to protect before he trusts, he said. Before she could ask more, the thunder of hooves grew louder. Taz's face hardened, returning to the focused warrior she first saw. He grabbed the reins, placed one hand on her leg so she wouldn't shift painfully, prepared to move. "Hold tight," he said. "We ride for the canyon." The riders appeared again as shadows on the horizon, closer than before. Dust rose behind them like a rising storm. Leora gripped the saddle, her heart racing. "Why won't they stop?" she whispered. Taz's voice was steady. "Because some men chase what they fear losing. But they don't know me," she said. His gaze flicked to her for a brief, sharp moment. "Are you sure?" Her breath froze. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer. "Not yet." Instead, he urged the horse forward and they raced across the desert toward the rising cliffs. Danger behind them and unanswered questions waiting in the shadows ahead. And as the canyon drew nearer, Leora felt the strange pull of fate, as though something in that stone valley held truths neither she nor Taza were prepared to face. But the riders kept coming and Taza kept riding toward safety, toward mystery, and toward a storm neither of them understood yet. The canyon rose ahead of them like a deep cut in the earth, its walls streaked with reds and browns that glowed under the afternoon sun. Taza guided the horse toward a narrow opening between two jagged cliffs, a place a stranger could ride past without ever seeing. Leora held on to him, trying to steady her breathing as the sound of the riders behind them rolled across the desert like distant thunder. Every time she looked back, the dust cloud seemed closer, thicker, as if danger itself had taken shape and refused to let go. When they reached the canyon mouth, the air turned cooler. Shadows lengthened along the stone, and the noise of the open desert softened. Taza slowed the horse and glanced up at the cliffs, as if greeting old memories. He slid down first, then helped Leora to the ground, his hands strong but gentle under her arms. Her leg throbbed when her foot touched the rock, but the bandage held. She stood close to the canyon wall, while he led the horse deeper into the narrow pass. "Is this place safe?" Her voice quiet under the weight of the stone around them. Taza paused to listen. Wind moved above them, whistling against the sharp edges. "Safe is a word the land does not know," he said. "But this canyon remembers my people. It knows our steps." He pointed deeper inside. "There is a hidden place farther in. Water. Shelter. We will rest there and learn why those men ride so hard." Leora knew there was another question still hanging between them, one he had not answered. She limped alongside him, leaning on the canyon wall, trying to ignore the fear in her chest. "Earlier," she said, "you asked if I was sure they did not know me. Why would you say that?" He kept walking, leading the horse by the reins. For a moment she thought he would ignore the question, but then he sighed softly. "Because trouble rarely rides this far without a name to chase. Men do not burn this much dust for a stranger. Someone gave them a reason." Her heart tightened. "But I left quietly. I did not steal. I did not break any law." He looked back at her over his shoulder. "Did anyone in your town want you gone?" She thought of the sheriff, of the store owners who stopped trusting her credit after her husband died, of the rancher who offered help with a smile that felt more like a threat. But most of all, she thought of one man, a trader named Calder who had pushed too close, whose words had turned from sweet to sharp when she refused him. She remembered his eyes, cold and certain. The way he told her no widow could survive without a man to speak for her. Leora swallowed. There was someone who did not take kindly to hearing no, she admitted. But he would not send riders after me. That would be madness. Taz's eyes darkened. A man with wounded pride can be more dangerous than a desert storm. They moved deeper into the canyon. The path narrowed, twisting between tall rock walls that blocked out much of the sky. Leora began to feel as though the world had shrunk, funneling them toward something unknown. The air grew cooler, and the smell of dust changed to the faint, clean scent of water. Soon they reached a small clearing where the canyon widened. A thin stream ran along the rock, glimmering in the dim light like a silver thread. Taza tied the horse near a flat stone, then knelt beside the water, cupping it in his hands to drink. Leora joined him, lowering herself carefully to protect her leg. The water tasted like blessing, washing away some of the dryness in her throat and some of the dust from her thoughts. "Did your people live here?" she asked, watching him trace the edge of the stream with his fingers. "We passed through," he replied. "This canyon lies between lands. Not home, not enemy. It is a crossing. My father brought me here when I was a boy. He said a man must know the places where he can disappear when the world grows loud." There was a softness in his voice when he spoke of his father, and then a quiet sadness that settled afterward. Leora listened, sensing he carried a story the way others carried scars. "What happened to your people?" she asked gently. Taza sat back on his heels and looked at the water. "Change came," he said. "Soldiers. Deals made in rooms of wood instead of under the sky. Promises written in a language not ours. Some of my people agreed, some refused. My father was among those who would not bend." His jaw tightened. "He is gone now. Many are. The rest were moved like cattle." "I am sorry," Leora whispered. "No land should forget the footsteps of the people who love it." He studied her for a moment, as if weighing her words. "You speak with respect for a land that did not grow you," he said. "I lost my place too," she replied. "Maybe that makes the world feel different." A new sound drifted into the canyon, faint but rising. Taza stiffened, head lifting. The riders had reached the outer cliffs. "They found the canyon," Leora said, her pulse quickening. "They follow tracks," Taza answered, "but they do not know its heart." He stood and moved toward a shadowed crack along the canyon wall. "There is a ledge above, a path only those with careful feet can use. We will go up and watch." He helped her to her feet. The climb was difficult with her wounded leg, but he supported her weight without complaint. Step by step, they moved along a narrow rock path, high enough that they could see the canyon floor, yet remain wrapped in shadow. From here, the stream below looked like a thin line of glass. The first riders entered the canyon moments later. Leora counted 3 men, their faces half hidden by dust and brimmed hats. One rode ahead with the posture of authority, his coat of dark leather worn but fine. Even from a distance, something in his manner made her stomach twist. The lead rider reined in his horse near the stream and scanned the ground. Taza watched beside her, his eyes narrowed. "They move like men used to hunting," he muttered. The lead rider dismounted and knelt to study the tracks near the water. He pointed to a set of prints and spoke to the others, his voice too low to carry clearly, but Leora felt a chill at the sound. She knew that tone, sharp, controlling, certain he would get what he wanted. She leaned forward, squinting to see his face. When he lifted his head, light caught his features, and her breath caught in her chest. Calder memories rushed back in a painful wave. The day he came to her small house with a bottle and a promise of help she did not ask for. The way he insisted he could pay off her debts if she agreed to marry him. When she refused, he smiled thinly and told her the town would turn its back on a woman who did not know her place. He did not shout. He did not threaten outright. His cruelty had lived in cold patience. Leora felt her knees weaken. "It is him," she whispered. "Calder is leading them." Taz's gaze remained fixed on the men below. "Who is Calder?" "Trader," she said. "A man who buys and sells whatever brings coin." "He wanted to buy me too. I said no." Her hands shook as she remembered. "The day before I left, I heard him speaking with the sheriff. I did not hear everything, only my name and the word debt. I knew I had to go, before they tried to use me as part of some bargain." Taz's jaw clenched. and now he hunts you in my land." Below, Calder stood and looked around the canyon, eyes sharp and hungry. He walked toward the place where Taz's horse had stood before they climbed. He bent again, tracing the faint hoofprints leading toward the hidden ledge trail. Leora's heart jumped. "Can you follow us up here?" she whispered. "The path is narrow," Taza replied quietly. "Only those who trust the rock can climb it. But he will know we pass this way." "That may be enough." One of the other riders, a broad man with a scar running along his jaw, spoke up. His voice carried a little farther. "Maybe she died out here, Calder." "Desert takes the weak." Calder shook his head slowly. "She is worth more alive," he answered. "And the man with her is no fool. Those prints show skill. That means he will try to keep her breathing." He smiled, a thin, cold curve. "Which also means he must care at least a little. Men who care leave patterns." His words sent a strange heat up Leora's neck. Taza shifted beside her, his shoulders stiff. Feelings were the last thing on his mind right now. But he understood what Calder implied. "Why would he think you care for me?" Leora asked softly, eyes still on the men below. Taz's voice was low. "Because he underestimates what simple honor can do. Men like him believe no one protects a stranger unless their heart is tied to them. They do not understand duty or respect." Her chest tightened. "I did not ask you to risk yourself." He turned to her, his dark eyes steady. "You did not have to ask." Down below, Calder mounted his horse again. He spoke to his men. "We ride on. The canyon splits ahead. We block both paths and let them choose. A hunted soul always shows which way it fears more." The men nodded, and the group pressed deeper into the canyon. Unaware of the eyes watching from above, when the riders vanished around the bend, Taza exhaled slowly. "They mean to drive us," he said, "not just chase us. They want to push us into a place they can control." "Can they?" Leora asked. "If we follow their game, yes," he answered. "If we remember this land better than they do, no." He pointed to a dark crack higher up in the cliff. "There is another path. Few know it. It will take us above the canyon, where we can see every move they make." Her leg ached, but the thought of staying anywhere near Calder pushed her forward. "Then we take that path," she said. Ta studied her, a small glimmer of respect in his gaze. "You carried more strength than your town saw," he said quietly. "They were blind." She lifted her chin. "They saw what they wanted, not who I was." Together they climbed toward the hidden way, moving carefully along the rock. Each step tested Leora's will, but Taz's steady hand on her arm and the thought of Calder's cold smile pushed her onward. The canyon seemed to breathe around them, its stone walls whispering secrets of those who had passed through long before, as they rose higher. The sky opened above, a wide stretch of blue that made the world feel endless again. The air cooled, and the wind carried faint sounds from below, fragments of the riders' voices bouncing off the stone. Calder's words floated up in pieces, talk of reward, of clearing old debts, of bringing a stubborn widow back where she belonged. Leora's stomach twisted. To him, she was not a person. She was a prize. A problem to be dragged back and locked into the life she had fought to escape. Taza heard it too. His hand tightened on the rock as they paused on a ledge. "This is not just a hunt," he said. "This is a claim." She forced her gaze away from the canyon floor and met his eyes. "He can claim whatever story he wants," she said, her voice shaky but firm. "But he does not own my life." Wind moved her hair across her face. Taza reached up without thinking and brushed it aside so she could see. His fingers paused for a brief second against her cheek. And something unspoken passed between them. Something fragile but strong. Then he pulled his hand back, and the moment vanished into the wind. "We will keep ahead of them," he said. "But this conflict is bigger than the canyon. Calder walks with the same shadow that took my people's land. Men who believe they can own what they do not understand." "Then we stand against that shadow," she replied, surprised by the strength in her own words. He nodded once. "We will. But first we survive the night." As they moved along the high path, the sun began to dip. Long shadows crawled over the canyon, turning the stream below into a dark ribbon. The riders were still there, their figures small and restless. Calder stopped often to examine the ground, as if he could read the earth. Itself, he did not look up. He had no idea how. Close they were, and he had no idea that the widow he hunted was no longer the frightened woman he thought he could control. But the desert knew, the canyon knew, and as darkness slowly reached across the stone, Taza and Leora climbed toward a place where paths crossed, secrets waited, and the wound in his heart and the loneliness in hers would soon face a trial neither of them had seen coming. Night settled over the canyon like a dark blanket, folding itself into eve. A crack of stone, and every twist in the path. From the high ledge, Leora could see only a thin slice of sky filled with scattered stars. The desert, which had burned under the sun all day, now breathed out its stored warmth, leaving the air cooler and sharp. She and Taza had found a narrow hollow in the rock, just wide enough for the two of them, and a small fire hidden from view below. The horse rested nearby, its reins tied to a thorny bush that clung to the ledge as if it had grown out of stubbornness alone. The small flames danced low, casting shifting shadows across Taz's face. Leora watched him as he checked the bandage on her leg, his fingers moving with careful skill. The herbs he had used earlier kept the swelling down, but the long climb had left her sore and tired. Still, she did not complain. The fear of Calder and his men pressed on her more than the pain. "Your leg is holding," Taza said quietly. "You are stronger than you think," she smiled faintly. "I never had to test it like this before." "The frontier tests everyone," he replied. "It pushes a person until they find who they really are." Leora studied him, noticing again the calm in his dark eyes and the way he carried himself, steady and grounded. "And what did the land show you?" she asked. "Who are you, Taza?" He sat back, letting the fire warm his hands. For a moment he seemed far away, back in another time. "I once believed I would lead my people," he said. "My father trained me in our ways, in our stories, in the paths of the mountains and rivers. He said a man with a strong heart must stand between his people and the storms that come." "What changed?" she asked softly. "The storms grew too many." His voice dropped. "Soldiers came with papers and fences. Traders like Calder brought bottles and deals that took more than they gave. One night, men rode into our camp while most slept. They called it protection. They called it order. But what they took was land, and with it souls." His jaw tightened. My father tried to reason. They accused him of starting trouble. By dawn, he was gone, and many were taken away to a place I had never seen. Leora's chest ached as she listened. "And you?" "I was away with a scouting party," he said. "We returned to smoke, broken cooking pots, and empty places where voices used to live. The ones who stayed explained what happened. The ones taken stayed only as memories." She reached across the small space between them and laid her hand gently on his arm. "I am sorry," she whispered. "No one should lose everything like that." He looked at her hand for a moment, then met her gaze. "Since that day," he said, "I have lived with a wound inside. I walk these lands to watch over what is left. I help where I can, but I do not stay too long anywhere. The heart learns to travel light when it has already lost too much." "That is why you were alone when you found me," she said. He nodded. "The land is my only constant. Until today." Her breath caught. "What changed today?" "You," he said simply. "You brought a different kind of storm." The words warmed her and frightened her at the same time. She pulled her hand back slowly, unsure what to say. For a long moment they sat in silence, listening to the crackle of the fire and the distant murmur of the desert wind. Then a faint echo rose from below, breaking the quiet. The sound of a man shouting orders. Horses snorting. Calder's voice, harsh even when wrapped in distance. Taza moved quickly, brushing dirt over the fire until it died. "Leaving them in the dim light of the stars? They are restless," he murmured. "They do not like the dark when they cannot see their prey." "Will they climb up here? They will search for paths," Taza said. but we know this ridge better than they do. At first light, they will move again. That is when we choose our ground." "What do you mean?" she asked. "The canyon will not stay a hiding place forever," he replied. "Sooner or later, Calder will try to trap us where he feels strongest. We must choose a place where the land stands with us instead." "You plan to face him," she realized, her voice barely more than a breath. His eyes never left the shadows below. "Running only feeds a hunter's pride. At some point, we turn and show him he cannot claim every life he reaches for." Fear twisted inside her, but along with it came a stubborn flame of courage. "If you face him, I will not hide," she said. "He came for me. That is my conflict as much as yours." Taza looked at her, measuring her words. "Facing a man like Calder is not simple," he said. "He is protected by laws written far from here, by ideas that see people like my people and widows like you as small pieces to move around." "Then we show him we are not pieces," she answered. "We are people who can stand." He watched her for another long breath, then nodded. "At dawn, we move to the high rim. From there, we can see every step they take. The land will show us where to make our stand." The hours that followed felt longer than any Leora had ever known. She slept in short bursts, waking at every small sound. Whenever she opened her eyes, Taza was near, sometimes sitting alert at the ledge, sometimes resting with his back against the stone, but always within reach. The Apache warrior seemed tied to the land in a way that soothed her even when fear clawed at her chest. When the first pale light of morning seeped into the canyon, they rose. The sky slowly shifted from deep blue to soft gray, then 2 streaks of gold. Taza helped her mount the horse again, then led it along a narrow path that climbed higher still, until they reached the rim of the canyon. From here, the world opened wide. The desert stretched out on both sides, a sea of rock and scattered brush. Far below, she could see the thin line of the stream and the slow movement of horses and men. Calder and his riders were already awake. They rode in a careful pattern, checking side paths and scanning the rock walls. Calder sat tall in the saddle, his coat flapping lightly in the morning breeze as he pointed and gave orders. He moved with the easy confidence of a man used to getting what he wanted. "They will expect us to keep running," Taza said. "They will follow the canyon until it opens into the lower flats. There they will try to circle and close in." "And what will we do?" Leora asked. "The opposite of what they expect?" He looked west, where the canyon wall sloped into a series of broken ridges and narrow shelves. There is a rock shelf above the flat ground ahead, high enough to watch, close enough to act. We go there. As they followed the rim toward that place, Leora's thoughts churned. She remembered the way Calder spoke to her in town, how he made every kindness feel like a debt. She remembered the sheriff looking away, pretending not to notice when Calder's hand lingered too long on her arm. She remembered how small and powerless she had felt. She did not feel that way now. Beside her walked a man who had lost a whole way of life and still chose to protect others. She was not a piece on Calder's board anymore. She was a widow who could make choices, even if those choices scared her. The rock shelf Taza chose jutted out over the lower flat like a natural lookout. From there, they could see where the canyon opened into a wide stretch of sandy ground, scattered with scrub. It was the perfect place for Calder to try to trap them. It was also a place where an Apache warrior who knew the land could turn the ground itself into an ally. Taza showed Leora where to sit, behind a thick stone that would shield her if bullets started to fly. He tied the horse in a shallow dip where it would remain hidden but close. Then he studied the rim, searching for stones he could move. Loose rock he could use to their advantage. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Preparing the land," he said. "If they ride under this shelf, a few heavy stones in the right place can change a battle." The word battle made her throat tighten. "You are only one man." "I am one man on ground I know," he replied calmly. "That counts for more than you think." She watched him wedge a large stone near the edge of the shelf, where one strong push could send it crashing down. Then he marked other places, mapping lines of sight, checking where the sun would sit when Calder arrived. He moved with quiet purpose, the careful focus of someone used to planning with little and expecting much. As the sun climbed higher, The sound of hooves rose from the canyon again. Calder and his men were moving toward the opening. Their figures appeared in the distance, growing larger with every step. Leora's heart pounded against her ribs. Her injured leg throbbed in time with her pulse. But she forced herself to stay still. Taza crouched beside her, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. "No matter what you see," he said quietly, "do not step into the open unless there is no other choice. The land can shield you. Let it." Her eyes met his. "What about you?" "I will be where I must be," he answered. "Trust that." The riders reached the mouth of the canyon. Calder raised his hand, and they halted. He scanned the flat ground ahead, then looked up along the canyon walls, suspicion sharpening his gaze. He sensed something, but he did not know where to place it. Ta lowered his voice to a whisper only Leora could hear. "He smells a trap, but does not know whose." "This is good," one of Calder's men, the scarred rider from the day before, pointed toward the open flat. "Tracks lead out there," he said. "Looks like they left the canyon." Calder narrowed his eyes, then nodded slowly. "Then that is where we go. Spread out." We closed the circle. He turned his horse toward the open ground, but before he moved, he called to the others. "Remember, the widow is not to be harmed. A body is worth nothing. A living, grateful bride settles debts." The word bride made Leora's stomach twist. Tez's hand tightened on the rock. As the riders started forward, Taza shifted to the edge of the shelf, staying low. He waited until the first horse passed under the shadow of the ledge. His muscles tensed, ready to move. Leora watched every nerve in her body drawn tight. Then Calder did something unexpected. Instead of riding in the center of the group, he slowed and drifted toward the canyon wall, scanning the heights again. His eyes traced the line of rock, then paused. As if he sensed more than he could see, his gaze stopped dangerously close to where Leora and Taza hid. Her breath froze. Had he seen them? Taza remained utterly still, even his breathing controlled. For a moment, the entire world seemed to hang on Calder's next move. Finally, Calder turned his horse slightly and spoke to his men. "Hold," he ordered. "Something is wrong. My gut says they did not run that way." He pointed toward the rim. "If I were that Apache, I would choose the high ground." The words struck Leora like a cold splash of water. He knew Taza was Apache. He knew enough of Taz's skill to guess his thinking. The hunt had become something sharper, more personal. It was no longer only about dragging a widow back to town. It was about proving power over a man who refused to bend. Calder drew his gun, the metal glinting in the sun. "Eyes up," he called. "They are watching. And I plan to make sure they know this land belongs to those who pay for it, not to wanderers and stubborn widows." Taz's jaw tightened. He leaned close to Leora, his voice barely a breath. "It seems the moment chooses us sooner than I hoped." "What will you do?" she whispered back. Fear and resolve, fighting inside her. He looked at her, and in his eyes she saw both the weight of his past and the fierce courage that made him ride into danger for a stranger. "I will stand where my father could not," he said. "I will show Calder that some hearts cannot be bought or pushed from their place." Before she could answer, Calder lifted his gun higher, aiming along the rim as if trying to draw them out. "Widow," he shouted, his voice echoing against the stone. "Leora, I know you can hear me. You come down now, and no one has to bleed for your mistakes. Stay hidden, and I will drag you out and let this Apache watch everything he tried to protect fall apart." The words cut into the quiet like a knife. Leora felt anger rise inside her, hot and shaking. Taz's hand hovered near the grip of his own weapon. His eyes never leaving the men below, the wind stilled, the desert waited, and on that high shelf, above the frontier ground where claims and hearts were about to collide, the widow with the healed leg and the Apache with the wounded heart faced a choice that would change both their lives. While Calder's gun remained raised, ready to fire at the first sign of defiance, the wind moved across the rock shelf in a slow sweep, brushing Leora's hair across her face as she stared down at Calder and the riders gathered below. The canyon held its breath, waiting for the next move. its walls echoing the tension that clung to the morning air. Calder sat tall in the saddle, his gun raised, his voice ringing with the confidence of a man who believed he already owned the ending of this story. But the land did not agree, and neither did the people standing above him. Ta shifted beside Leora, staying low as he moved toward the edge of the shelf. She watched his steady hands, his calm breath, the quiet strength that lived in him even when danger loomed. He looked over his shoulder once, meeting her eyes with a silent question. She nodded. She trusted him. The fear still tugged at her chest, but she no longer felt powerless. She was done being chased, done being spoken for, done being treated like something a man could bargain with. Calder's voice rose again. Leora, last chance. You walk down on your own feet, and this ends clean. Keep hiding, and I will make sure that Apache regrets picking up what doesn't belong to him. Leora stepped forward before Taza could stop her. She didn't reveal herself completely, but she let her voice carry down the canyon wall. I am not something that belongs to anyone, she said, her words steady, and I will not go back with you. Calder jerked his head upward, eyes narrowing as he tried to spot her. You do not understand the trouble you've caused, he barked. Your debts, your land, your choices. You think you can outrun all that my land was taken from me? She answered. My choices were ignored. And any debt you claim is a lie you told to get your way. A murmur passed through the men around Calder. Some looked uneasy as if they didn't know this part of the story. Calder glared at them, then shouted, Toward the rock wall, your husband left those debts. I offered a fair solution. A fair solution for you, she snapped. Ta laid a hand lightly on her arm, grounding her before she could lean too far into the open. He whispered, Your voice is strong, but be careful. He wants to draw us out. I know, she whispered back, but I'm done being silent. Taza nodded once. He understood below. Calder motioned for the scarred rider to move toward the canyon wall. Find the path, he ordered. They can't stay hidden forever. This was the moment Taza had been waiting for. He glanced toward the heavy stone he had propped on the edge. The rider moved directly beneath it, unaware of the trap he walked into. The ground here was narrow, the canyon wall steep. A well-placed stone could block their advance without harming anyone. Taza pressed his shoulder against the rock and gave a firm push. The stone rolled off the shelf, crashed onto the path below, and shattered in a burst of dust and echoing thunder. The horses reared, and the men shouted in surprise. No one was hit. But the narrow path they would have used to climb was now blocked by shattered rock. Calder wheeled his horse around, fury flashing across his face. So that's how it is, he snarled. You want to fight, Apache? You'll have one. Taza stepped forward now, letting Calder see him fully. He stood tall on the cliff edge, the rising sun framing him in warm light. I do not want to fight, he called down, but I will not allow you to take her. She is not your debt. She is a woman with her own path. Calder lifted his gun again, aiming upward. You think that canyon will save you? You think being alone out here means you get to choose? Before Calder could squeeze the trigger, one of his own men, older rider with a gray beard and tired eyes, put a hand on his arm. Calder, this ain't right, he muttered. You said she owed you. But you never said it was just because she said no to you. Calder yanked his arm free. Stay out of it. The older man didn't back down. We came because you claimed she took something. But all she took was her own freedom. That ain't something a man should hunt. A few riders shifted uncomfortably. Calder's grip tightened on his gun, fury rising like heat off the desert. Leora saw it. Taza saw it. Calder was losing control, and the canyon had heard enough lies. Taza raised his voice again. Go back, Calder. The frontier is wide enough for all of us. Let her walk her path, and you keep yours. Calder's voice cracked with rage. I will not be made a fool by some stray Apache and a stubborn widow. He raised his gun. Leora's heart slammed against her ribs. But before he could fire, the older rider grabbed the barrel and shoved it upward. The shot went harmlessly into the sky. Calder spun around and struck the man across the face, knocking him off his horse. The others shouted, horses stumbling and kicking up dust. Taza moved fast, pulling Leora back from the edge. Stay close, he whispered. If they turn on each other, the desert will decide the rest. Below, the group fractured into chaos. The older rider struggled to rise, blood on his cheek. Two others dismounted to help him, while Calder shouted at them, spitting orders that no longer held weight. The scarred rider glared at Calder with something close to disgust. You lied, he growled. You dragged us out here on false words? Calder spun, his face twisting with something sharp and desperate. She is mine. The land is mine. Even that Apache will learn it. He raised his gun again, but this time, no one stood beside him. He was one man with pride and a weapon. And the land no longer cared for either. The scarred rider pulled his own gun not to aim at Taza or Leora, but at Calder. Put it down, he warned. You lost. Calder froze, disbelief spreading across his face. You turn on me. You ain't worth dying for, the rider said. Calder's breath came fast now, rage and fear mixing in his eyes. He looked toward the canyon rim as if searching for someone to blame. Then he spurred his horse away, racing across the flat ground. He didn't look back. His pride couldn't survive facing the truth, so he ran from it the only way he knew alone. The men left behind watched him go, then slowly turned their horses toward the canyon exit. The scarred rider looked up once and nodded at Taza, an unspoken truce passing between them. Then they disappeared into the distance. Silence fell over the canyon. Laura, scaled so sharply her shoulders trembled. Her knees weakened, and she steadied herself against the rock. Taza rushed to her side, catching her before she slipped. It is over, he said softly. She leaned into him, letting the relief wash through her. I didn't think we'd survive this. You survived because you stood up, he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. You found your voice. And you, she said, you healed my leg, protected me, believed me. No one has done that since my husband passed. His hand lingered on her cheek. You healed something in me too, he said quietly. A wound I carried for many seasons. She looked up at him, her breath catching. Your heart, yes, he answered. My heart. They stayed there for a long moment, the morning sun warming the rock around them, the fear of the past days finally loosening its grip. When they made their way down the canyon later, the land felt different, as if it recognized what they had overcome. The air carried the scent of sage, and the wind moved gently through the tall desert plants. Taza led the horse beside her, letting her walk slowly to build strength back into her leg. What will you do now? She asked him. He looked out across the horizon. This land is wide. I can choose many paths, but the one I want to walk now begins with you. Her eyes softened. And I want to walk with you, she said. Wherever the land leads, they reached the flat ground where the stream ran clear and cool. Taza helped her mount the horse again, then swung up behind her, his arms around her in a way that felt safe and full of promise. As they rode out of the canyon, the desert opened in front of them like a new chapter waiting to be lived. Leora rested her hand over his, feeling the steady heartbeat of the man who had protected her, guided her, and unknowingly filled the empty place her grief left behind. Taza looked at the horizon and spoke softly. The land tests us, but sometimes it also brings healing. She leaned back against him. You healed my leg, she said, and I healed the wound in your heart. He smiled against her hair. And now we heal each other. The horse carried them forward, away from the shadows of the canyon and into the soft gold of a rising date, to souls who had survived fear, fought for freedom, and found a future the desert itself had blessed. And the story ended not with loss, but with hope, strength, and a love born from courage on the old American frontier.